Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China convened in Beijing amid considerable domestic and international attention. How has this monumental meeting set China's development blueprint for the next 5 years? And what are the prospects for China's high-tech advancement as the country seeks core tech breakthroughs? To find out more, I'm glad to be joined by Professor Xue Lan, Dean of Schwarzman College at Tsinghua University. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to the discussion, Professor Xue. So, what are your takeaways from President Xi's report? Some would say there are no brand new concept or idea or terms being put forward. What do you make of that? They would say there's a strong consistency in terms of the policy making here.
Well, I think, first of all, we have to understand what is this document. In a way, this is really probably the most important policy document for China's development in the next 5 years. And so this is really going to provide the guidance and directions for the future development of 1.4 billion people. So it's not a news report or something else. So I think that the consistency and the clarity of the report is very critical. I think that we've already seen that there's a lot of uncertainties already there, and I think the last thing that people want is to have more uncertainties to confuse people. So I think the remarkable thing is that maintaining the policy direction and the policy consistency is very clear in this report. So China wants to continue its path in the last 40 plus years in the reform and openness, and China is continue to push for the economic and social development, and of course now with the term of so-called high quality development, and also to engage with the global community and to push for the peace and prosperity globally. So that's sort of the basic message China is trying to convey. And also we also recognize there are some new concepts and ideas being introduced. For example, I think that there's a new term that's used in the report, the Chinese style modernization. So this is something new. I think that, but for people who are familiar with the Chinese policy context, we know that modernization is really a key word in Chinese policy context for many years. I think that in the 1950s, the former Premier Zhou Enlai, I think, used it in the Fourth People's Congress, and in 2013, the third plenum of 18th Party Congress also used this term to talk about the modernization of China's governance. So I think that so this time is propose this new concept is really showing that China now, based on the past experience, wanted to present its own alternative development model, and I think this is the Chinese style modernization. So
Professor Xue, the Chinese nation has been fostering this idea or this policy principle, you may call it, a new development paradigm, and with domestic circulation as the mainstay, and then you have domestic and international circulations, reinforcing each other. It's supposed to generate a lasting momentum for the long-term development of the Chinese economy, as well as the steady recovery of the global economy. Tell us more about the new development paradigm.
Well, I think that if you think about in the past, I think that over the last 40 plus years, China's development was very much driven by export. I think that China has over the started by introducing foreign capital to China and OEM and so on. So China has really provided the world with lots of very so low cost and but high quality products, worldwide. And so China has become the world's largest manufacturer, and also in terms of exports as well. So I think that has really propelled China's economic growth. And I think, I think part of that, China was able to do that was also because China had this so-called the, uh, you know, uh, 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 very young and highly educated labor, low-cost labor, and so China was able to do that. But I think we now have seen that there are many things changed. I think over the years, one is first of all, I think that labor supply is no longer abundant, and also labor cost is also high. So I think that in China the factor issue has changed, and the second issue is that because of China's exports, large exports, there are indeed trade frictions getting more. I think that China's trade surplus with U.S. and some other countries are, I think there are concerns, and so that's why China has been trying hard to work with the U.S. try to address this issue, and certainly China is no longer to accumulate such big trade surplus. And the third, of course, is also because of the development in China within itself. Chinese, the demand for high quality products and other services also are growing. So I think now, China wants to become more balanced development based on the, engagement with the international market, but also based on the domestic, consumption, domestic need. So I think domestic, so consumption needs is something that, that's going to drive, China's development, in the next stage. So that's why there's, so-called the double circulation of, between domestic demand and also global demand. Let me also say another thing that China itself is a huge market. Within China, there's also very imbalanced regional development. So while we see that there's a tremendous growth in the coastal areas, but inland, I think there's still many areas that's not, fully developed. So that within itself, that imbalance also is another driver for further development. So I think Chinese domestic market also, there could be much further integration and development. So I think all of those put together, indeed, we see a new development paradigm emerging.
We are seeing, domestically and externally challenges. For example, in the domestic front, there are layoffs of employees in some of the high-tech companies in China. So what is taking place within this sector, for example?
Yeah, I think that's a very, indeed, I think it's a very interesting area. I think high-tech area, I think we've seen tremendous growth, over the last, 15, 20 years in many sectors, including internet economy and other things. So that really has really provided a lot of the benefits to Chinese society and to the global, community. But of course, indeed, recently we really see some new challenges in this sector in China. And the first thing I think is, we have to say is that, the U.S. Sanctions on Chinese high-tech companies, and also I think the extended impact on the global supply chain, and so I think that really has dampened China's high-tech development, and I think indeed has we've seen new waves of really sanctions and export controls on Chinese high-tech companies. So that really had a severe impact in this sector. I think the second thing is, of course, we see that in the in the last few years because of the COVID, and the global economy has also suffered, and also the venture capitals and other things that have driven high tech development also has declined. That also had some impact on the sector. Although I think the impact is somewhat mixed. For example, now we're able to use, many of the the IT tools like during the COVID, and that actually provided some impetus for some areas growth. The third factor is I think it's also related to the last few years regulation on some particular sectors. Because I think, as I mentioned, the last 10, 15 years, I think China's internet economy and many other sectors have been growing very fast. But also in that development, and there were also some issues of concern that generated, sort of general public's concern, and sometimes, with, regulated market, and, that may hurt benefit the interests of general public, and also may generate undue risks. So I think that the government has also put out some, regulation policies that may have also had some impact on the high-tech industry, particularly the internet economy. So we put all those together, you see that indeed we see some, negative impact on the sector. But I think on the last issue, I think the regulation on the high-tech sector, I think it's, on the internet economy, I think actually that provided, sort of better, healthier, industrial development, environment. So hopefully that actually, promote in the long run, better development of the internet industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, related to that, during the speech, Mr. Xi Jinping just stressed very much the role of innovation, high-tech advancement in driving the economic growth. Speak of that, Professor Xue, where are we now in terms of innovation, for example, in comparison with the United States?
Well, I think, first of all, I think China has made tremendous progress in the innovation area. China's R&D spending, I think it's, in terms of R&D intensity, it's a 2.4 plus percent. I think that, which is, I think on par with many developed countries in Europe and in North America. And China has also largest, pool of talent in doing R&D, and China has published the largest number of academic papers to the world, making a great contribution to the global knowledge pool. And in patent application in China is already Chinese patent applications is more than half of the world applications. So I think there's a tremendous benefits generated to Chinese economy, but also to the global economy. And we see that in innovation space, we see the 5G, high-speed train, electric vehicles. So many of those very tangible benefits. At the same time, that we also have to be mindful that China still has a lot to catch up. I think in terms of in basic research, I think in terms of the most original research, so high impact research, I think that U.S. is still the lead, and so China is still lagging behind on those sort of issues, those kind of research. So there's a need to change that. And also in terms of in the innovation space, there's China. There's still very much reliant on many of the frontier technologies, particularly in some critical sectors such as the semiconductor industry. So U.S. is still, and also some other European countries are really still having the full control of the industry. So I think now China is has to work hard to catch up.
Mm-hmm. In particular, this semiconductor sector, the U.S. is imposing this sweeping ban, basically,
Yeah.
on the export control of semiconductor products. How should China respond to this practice? The U.S. purpose is seen as very clear. That is to slow down the Chinese, high-tech development.
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, let's say that actually, this first of all, what the U.S. is doing is first of all, I think of course will slow down China's development in this leading sectors, but also it will hurt U.S. tremendously because I think China has been probably one of the largest market for the semiconductor industry in the U.S. And so without being able to export to China, I think the U.S. Companies will also suffer. I just saw that report. I don't know, not fully confirmed yet, that the Intel has to lay off 20% of its employees. If that's true, I think that really shows the negative impact. So what U.S. is doing is hurting not just China but also itself. So I think first of all that's really a very bad thing for all of us. Of course, I think given what the U.S. has been doing, I think China is really forced to be more self-reliant, and so China really have to work harder to build its own capabilities in semiconductor industry. Of course, this really has to be done, through coordination of the government support and also industry efforts, and to try to catch up. It may take some time, but certainly I think China in the past have demonstrated that when you're forced to be self-reliant, and China is able to be able to do that.
Well, efforts must be made at multiple fronts. Thank you, Professor Xue. Thank you for your insights and time.
Coming up next is the interview with Dr. Palitha Kahona, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to China, sharing his views on China's development.
Living in Beijing, I'm constantly amazed at the cleanliness of this city and the beauty of this city. Gardens are so well maintained. And then you see people everywhere, people enjoying the bounty that has been provided to them.
What do you think of China's current political system?
China has progressed, adapted, and in my view is continuing to move forward.
Welcome to the show, Ambassador. Well, let's shift it to 20th National Congress. As a Sri Lanka ambassador to China, what will you pay a special attention to during this twice-a-decade party congress?
And of course, naturally, I hope to be present as a diplomatic envoy at this event. We also look forward to the new policies that will be adopted for implementation in the future. We know that one reason, at least in my view and in the view of many others, that China has achieved this remarkable growth and level of prosperity is because of the leadership provided by the Communist Party of China. The very steadfast leadership, the wise guidance provided, and also the people-centered approach of the Communist Party has helped this country to achieve what it has achieved. The fantastic communication systems, the railway lines, the highways, the prosperity level, the fabulous cities, the conservation of nature. I mean, there are very few other places in the world where you can step out of your apartment into a jungle of roses or other flowering shrubs. Living in Beijing, I'm constantly amazed at the cleanliness of this city and the beauty of this city. The gardens are so well maintained. And then you see people everywhere, people enjoying the bounty that has been provided to them. And of course, all this didn't happen automatically. All this is the result of the leadership provided by the Communist Party of China and the very sage guidance provided by its leaders. And of course, we wish the Chinese people more success, more prosperity, and a greater future.
Ambassador, China, after decades of exploration and practices, has formed a political system with Chinese characteristics, let's say. What do you think of China's current political system, including the success it has achieved and the controversies it faces?
Of course, any system will have its critics, whether it's good or bad, or successful or not, will have its critics. Naturally, the Chinese system will have its critics, but the results produced by the system, the socialist system with Chinese characteristics, are just phenomenal. They have to be seen on the ground. They have to be seen in the people of this country. China has eliminated extreme poverty. This has never been achieved anywhere else in the world. And of course, this achievement has happened well in advance of the 2030 target date for the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. There are other goals China is striving to achieve, like carbon peaking by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. Again, this will be a huge change to the world that we live in. If we do not address the question of environment conservation and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, we may not have a world to live in the next 50, 60 years. So China will make a big contribution in this area. And of course, you look around and you see the prosperity level of the people, the crowds in the restaurants, in the entertainment areas. They are a reflection of what this country has achieved. So, as I said before, there will be critics. And of course, if there are no critics, then there's something wrong. But the important thing is China has progressed, adapted, and in my view, is continuing to move forward. I've been asked whether China is a model for anybody else. I think there are good things about the Chinese model that can be emulated. But Sri Lanka, for example, will have to find its own path to prosperity because we have our own unique characteristics which we have to work with and work on. So there are good things that we can copy from China, emulate from China, and we should also work with China. I think there are lots of things that we can work with China in the future.
As we know, this year marks the 65th anniversary of the diplomatic ties between the two countries. So look back over the past 60 years and half a decade. What's your assessment of the overall relationship?
I think we have to look at our relationship in the light of our long-standing connections. Our relationship goes back over 2,000 years, and that is the foundation on which our current relationship has been developed. Sri Lanka was one of the first countries to recognize the Young People's Republic. And as you quite rightly mentioned earlier in your introduction, in 1952, 70 years ago, Sri Lanka breached an embargo on the export of strategic material to China and agreed to send rubber to China in exchange for rice. That is how important we thought that the relationship was at the time. In fact, Sri Lanka probably incurred the ire of various countries which were part of the embargo imposed on China. Later on, we established diplomatic relations in 1957. And you have to remember that as little as we were one of the noisiest advocates of China's assumption of its legitimate seat at the United Nations. Later on, China reciprocated magnificently when it contributed to Sri Lanka's development. Even today, we have the magnificent Bandaranaike Memorial Conference Center in Colombo, which was built by Chinese assistance, with Chinese assistance. More recently, during the conflict with the terrorist LTTE, China, Sri Lanka, to such an extent that some people would say that if not for China's assistance, we may not have been able to defeat the terrorists in 2009. Most recently, when we were confronted by the COVID-19 epidemic, China provided us with 26 million doses of vaccine, 3 million of which came as a gift. And it is safe to say that the Chinese vaccine has helped us to control the epidemic substantially in Sri Lanka. China also, in the post-conflict period, helped us tremendously in our development efforts. There are highways built with the Chinese assistance, harbors, airports, and many other projects. So I would say that the bilateral relationship is on a very strong basis at the moment. The leaders of the two countries have been in touch with each other regularly. And of course, like in any relationship, we have to work on it continuously. You should not take anything for granted. You have to keep on working at it. As I've said before, that a bilateral relationship, a good one, is like a marriage. You should never take the other partner for granted. You need to work on the relationship on a continuous basis. But it is safe to say that our bilateral relationship is now on a very strong basis, and we can be confident that it will grow stronger and firmer in the future.
We hope that will happen soon. Ambassador, some people assert that it is a Chinese strategic trap under the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, that has dragged Sri Lanka into the economic base. What do you make of that kind of allegation?
It's very important to differentiate between propaganda, convenient propaganda, and reality. Sri Lanka was the country that came to China for assistance, especially after the end of the conflict. We needed to grow fast. We needed to recover fast. We came to China. China did not come to Sri Lanka with a bag full of dollars and say, here's the money, spend it. We came to China. Then, of course, it is important to remember, and I emphasize this and underline this, it is less than 10% of Sri Lanka's external debt is owed to China. Most of it, close to 9%, is owed to multilateral institutions, international financial organizations, and other bilateral donors. So it is mischievous to suggest that Chinese funds resulted in a debt trap and brought Sri Lanka to where it is now. Of course, we are finding it difficult to pay back loans, but most of these loans are not from China.
Well, with that, we come to the end of today's discussion. Many thanks to Ambassador Kahonda. You can also find us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.